drone racing has been around in some form for years, but it wasn't until leagues like the DRL and DR1 arrived that it started catching the attention of the general public. Fast forward to today, and races air on major TV networks while pilots bag six-figure contracts and major sponsorship deals.
Since DRL founded, obviously it's changed the sport quite a bit because we've managed to bring it to a mainstream audience, people who would never encounter it in that underground, secretive fields and parking lots environment it was in before. We have brands like Allianz, the global insurance company, BMW, Swatch, so non-endemic blue chip sponsors who have come in and really gotten behind the sport. And in the last 12 months, we've had over 55 million people watch DRL on television.
So drone racing has come of age, right? Well, not quite. I spoke with some prominent pilots and spent some time behind the scenes at one of the televised races, and it turns out that now, more than ever, is a volatile time for the fledgling sport. I'd even go as far to say that the next year or so will prove critical to both the leagues and the pilots themselves. First, the good news. Leagues like the DRL, DR1 and MultiGP have clearly found a following. With TV deals on large networks in the bag, they have a platform to bring the sport to the mainstream. The DRL and DR1, for example, can now compensate their pilots and offer hefty contracts to their champions. This has allowed pilots to make drone racing their career.
I had a runway. When I first started drone racing, I was working 3 jobs, going through college, full-time student, and I was drone racing. And it was just, I was work overload. Right as my runway was out, like I didn't have enough money for rent next month, I actually won the world championship. So this DRL has allowed me to continue with my passion.
Then of course there are the comparisons to esports, another, let's say, less conventional sport that has become not only a success but a viable career for talented players.
It's a physical form of a video game, right? You're looking at a screen, you have a controller, you're flying a drone around physically. We're able to actually create the same experience in the simulator.
But professionalization hasn't gone down well with everyone. Some drone enthusiasts feel that the rush to bring racing to the masses is diluting the community. As is often the case when a ramshackle hobby goes mainstream, money rears its ugly head and things get complicated.
Even basic things like insurance for a drone racing event didn't exist. So we had to overcome a lot of obstacles, and we spent over a year really just existing as a technology company, getting the technology developed in order to do this at a professional level.
On top of that, there are questions about how popular the sport actually is. Everyone we spoke to from the leagues was eager to share big viewership numbers, often in the double-digit millions. But, and this is where things start to get curious, not everything seems to line up.
What universally has happened, at least on the hardware industry side, has been an oversaturation of the market, and everyone's fighting for a smaller piece of the pie. Meanwhile, you have DRL, who has reached a lot of people, don't get me wrong. Like, most people now know of drone racing through DRL, but what they know of drone racing is, oh, is that a racing drone? I think I watched that for a few minutes on ESPN1.
Right.
People are tuning in, but they're tuning out.
There are other challenges too. Unsurprisingly, drone racing is a very male-dominated sport, and sadly, that's something that isn't likely to change soon. Talented female pilots are out there, but it's proving hard for them to break through into the mainstream leagues. It's something that the leagues and pilots seem aware of, but are still figuring out.
It's a very complicated problem. I think whenever I have this conversation with people, they often come in with a very clear perspective of, I think you should put a woman in the league, or I think you should do this or that. And as you get towards the center of that conversation, they begin to see the complexity of it, of sort of what is the dynamic of that. You know, our answer is we want the most competitive pilots in the world in our league. I think as a sport, drone racing overall needs to find a way to be more inviting to women.
Whoever you are, if you do want to get into the sport, there's a lot to learn. This is where simulators come in. For $20 and a controller, you can theoretically learn to race without having to hang out at a disused warehouse.
I think that the future of drone racing is going to come through simulation. And the guys put in months of time straight. They're pretty serious. Just like any kind of video game, whether that be Call of Duty or PUBG or heck, like Mario, Once a year, we have a recruitment program where anyone in the world can try out for DRL and become a professional pilot for a pretty serious contract. And we're starting to see a lot of pilots come through pure simulation, which I think is very unique for our sport.
But the biggest question seems to be whether this sport can grow to become a viable career for the many and not just the elite few. The DRL, for example, is invite only, unless you're a whiz on that simulator, which has some people worried this is more about whether your face fits rather than talent.
I think there's always going to be negative people out there, and I think a lot of that can also stem from jealousy, right? They also want to have the opportunities to drone race and drop everything and follow their passion as much as possible, but maybe it might not be for everybody, right? They might already have a family, or they might have other career paths that they're already in. So for me, at least, it's worked out. The stars have aligned.
Even the leagues themselves don't know what the future holds. With the DR1 telling me, because drone racing is a new sport, there's really no roadmap to say this is where you end up after a few years of racing. Either way, the leagues are pushing hard to bring drone racing into the mainstream, but to do so they are potentially asking those that love the sport most to make a decision, career or community.
Competition is cool, right? It's when competition changes your moral values. We're out here, we're all having fun, and everyone's getting together to help Chad figure something out with his quad. What bothers me is when it gets so serious that when you don't help somebody. If you know that you could help somebody with a race, or you can help somebody fix their quad so that they can race, and then you don't just because you want that advantage, to me, that's where I don't like competition.
And we haven't even talked about the spectators. After all, it's their eyeballs that will keep the sport alive. And herein lies potentially the biggest challenge. Watching a drone race live is hard. These things are small and they move incredibly fast. The race we went to was held in a theme park, and you couldn't even see the whole course from the ground. Which is no doubt why the leagues have optimized themselves for TV. With cameras around the track and the ability to view live feeds from the drones, it makes much more sense for the viewers at home. Stumbar suggests that larger drones, something called the X-Class, is what is needed to get more viewers interested. These meter-wide things are huge and certainly more of a spectacle, but those races are still fairly grassroots, meaning we're kind of back at square one in terms of something that you or I might want to watch on a Sunday afternoon. Either way, for now at least, the leagues don't seem to be worried.
Sports takes time. I don't think when I started DRL in 2015, I had any illusion that in 2018, it would be unanimous that everyone around the world would talk about what happened in the Drone Racing League the night before. I think most sports flounder for a long time. Most of them take decades to develop. I think what's exciting for the Drone Racing League is that I think if you'd asked me in 2015 where we'd be in 2018, I never would have predicted we'd gotten this far.